Hey everybody, welcome back to Talk Jamie Talk. I do apologize for whatever just happened and the podcast just went off for whatever reason. I just happened to look down and I was like, there is nothing going. So again, I want to give this disclaimer that I am not a licensed mental health counselor or any of that. I just report the news and I report things going in and on around the community and in other counties and states and basically this is a trigger warning that if you cannot handle sensitive topics that have to do with guns and mental illnesses, now is your time to make your exit, because we do not want anybody becoming triggered based upon what we are talking about here today. Talking about the case of Genesis Moreno, who walked into the Texas Lakewood church on Sunday afternoon and opened fire. She already had left a trail of police encounters, court records, and social media posts her estranged say should have raised red flags. And okay, so we're going to get into it. So I read the article that came from ABC7. You have to go look it up yourself, because last time I did read it, but I don't know if it got it on the other podcast because we got cut off for whatever reason. But this time I'm just finna talk straight off the dome. Now, I was saying there were several red flags that let them know that she was in trouble, and nobody, it seems like the mother-in-law really just kept trying. The mother-in-law really tried to get the state to see that something is wrong here. You need to move this child out of her custody. And the child's father couldn't help him because the child we're talking about is the 7-year-old that was shot in the same incident. Don't know if the shot came from the police or what, but we're saying that, we're going to wait and find out because we don't want to put inaccurate sources out there yet. But the child that was shot, his father is in prison because he's a sex offender. So it lets you know a little bit of just how dysfunctional this woman was walking around. She was estranged from her family and her husband. And she had a history of mental illnesses. Now, this is where we throw the question out there. At what point do we say the mentally ill cannot purchase a firearm without, taking their rights away? And it's hard to do and say without, so many advocates coming at you. But my personal opinion is that if someone has mentally illness and they're unable to stay stabilized, mentally stable, with or without medication, they do not need no firearms. And I'm mentally stable and I don't even buy firearms because it's just a scary thought of what if, so when I think about this case, this woman had a firearm and she had already been caught in 2022 with two firearms. What do you need that for? So who's to blame here in what happened? Is it the state or who? In which at this point, we have to go back and look into who is making these decisions, letting these people have guns, because there is some laws and regulations that do speak up against mental health. Some places are required to run background checks. And if they do or not, I don't know, because the thing about someone who is schizophrenic, they are the master of manipulators in a way, because a person who is schizophrenic, and this is why I don't like when people throw that term away and label certain people that they don't like as schizophrenic or delusional, because there are real cases out here of people who are schizophrenic. So now when we start using this term as jokes, I heard a pastor one time preaching about it, calling something a spiritual schizophrenic. Let me tell you something. That's something you don't want to play with, because a schizophrenic can go from straight 0 to 100 on you. One thing that I've learned is that schizophrenia is a unique mental illness And it can be very creative. I mean, very creative. People who are schizophrenic, they're so creative, they don't even realize how creative they are. And I'm talking about in the good ways now. But the problem is when they become emotional distressed because they can't regulate emotions good. They can't sense what others are feeling good. They don't have good senses in that area. Like me and you, we can look at somebody and tell, hey, that person's smiling, so they don't feel good. Something must be going on with them, and we'll back off of them. However, someone with schizophrenia can't see that. Another thing is when they're in their creative moments, the thing is sometimes they can hype up. And that emotional arousal may go so high up off the scale till they don't even realize that you just went from being creative in a good way to now you're dangerous. You're dangerous. And this is where they black out and they transform, transition, or switch, however you want to call it. They switch to another person. Back in the day, this was called multiple personality disorder. That's what they used to call it back in the days. But in today's world, it's called dissociative identity disorder. When they switch identities to get through whatever crisis that they're in. So if Moreno was in this type of crisis, going through this divorce and, nobody knows what else, because they say she was just posting stuff on social media, and I really haven't looked to see what it was, but I'm just going off of the article, what I read in the article, that if she was going through an emotional distressful time, it's possible that she did lose it, because once they blank out and they switch to another person, I'm gonna tell you, you have no idea. They have no idea what they are doing. It just happens. It just happens because that person that they switch to is the stronger identity that can handle the crisis that they're in. And again, this is why I get upset when I see people labeling people who don't have schizophrenia with schizophrenia or making jokes about it, because it's nothing that's funny about someone who's not whole. What's funny about that? This woman had an issue, and one of the friends of the mother-in-law said that the system failed Moreno and her child. Now, she was a transgender too, so that could be why. I mean, we just don't know, but we know that the system knew that this was an unstable person and failed to remove the child. Now, if none of you care about Moreno, Genesis, let me call it Genesis. If you don't care nothing about Genesis, keep in mind there was a 7-year-old child that was shot in the head, possibly by cops, while trying to take Genesis down. Who do we blame for that? Do we say, well, the cops, they're supposed to do that? Putting another child, or was the cop supposed to stand back and wait till that child was able to get to a safe spot? You see, there's too many flaws here within that county that just aren't adding up. Too many red flags. Too many red flags. Even down to social services still put this child in Genesis custody, knowing that the schizophrenia was not stabilized. She wasn't stabilized to be having a child. But because the husband, who was in prison for not registering as a sex offender, he couldn't attend court. So that's how she obtained custody of the child. So you see, I'm going to tell you something. If you got loved ones that are schizophrenic, do yourself a service and do that person a service to know that sometimes they really don't know what they're doing, because schizophrenia is a brain disease. And once that brain starts getting overloaded, it heats up, and then it switches out to something else. And no identity has any idea what the other identity is doing. Now that sounds crazy, right? But it's not. It's a real thing. It's a real illness, mental illness. It's documented that there are so many people who cannot handle what they're going through in life that they break off into another identity. That's what it is. And when they get, like, whoever went into that courtroom probably was the stronger of identities. Strong enough to hold themselves together, to seem like they were well put together. But then when they come out of court, once that heat is off of them, they switch back to another identity. Nobody knows what was going on. But I can say that we have got to stop using the word schizophrenia like it's not a serious condition, because it is a serious condition. Now, the mother-in-law said that when Genesis was on her medication, that was the most sweet and lovingest person there was. But when she was off that medication, it was a totally different person. And those medications, what they do is keep a person calm. It works with the central nervous system. It calms them down where they can function throughout the day without, having the ups and lows of the emotional roller coaster and the imaginations and the creations that their mind may create. Now, in this case, the Lakewood shooter, there was just too many red flags. Somebody needs to be held accountable for why was that child with her? The child should never have been left with her alone, given what they knew about her. They knew she was sick. They knew that at times she was not stable. And since you can't predict when a person is going to be stable and unstable, then you have to do the right thing off the gate. You have to say, okay, well, I don't feel like I need to trust you with this child. We need to have supervised visitations. You need to do whatever you need to do to protect that child. But that child was left uncared for, unprotected. And the ones that did care for the children, they couldn't get custody because the state did not allow them to get custody. Now, I got to hand my hands off to the mother-in-law. She fought very hard to make sure the child was safe and also to make sure the mother was safe. But it didn't do no good because, again, the states ignore people. The moment you mention that somebody is mentally ill, that's when you start getting less care, less treatment, because they feel like, well, you're already a nobody. So why we gotta care about you? Let's just move this case along. It's not even important until something mass like this happens. Then they come back and say, how can we make the laws better? How can we keep guns out of the mentally ill hands? How can we create a safe environment for those that are mentally ill and those that aren't mentally ill without having to put them into institutions? This isn't a right now battle. This battle been going on. It's been going on for years. And we still don't got it right. The courts still get it wrong. Social services is beginning to look like, how can I say? I don't even know what to call it. Social services is beginning to look like a group of social, I want to say aristocrats, but I don't even know what that means. That's what I want to say. It's just beginning to look like a social place for bullying. That's what it looks like. Social services is hiring bullies. And it looks like they only care about making their money and making somebody feel small about their condition. And judging from this happening in a place that's far away from where I'm at, and it's happening here in my county too, yeah, that's what it's looking like. Social services is a house of bullies. And it's bad to say that, but you look at how many children have been displaced and put right back into the hands of their abuser because the social service person, case manager, or worker didn't want to do the work. And you look at how many people who are truly mentally ill, they never go before the judge. But they'll put a person who's sane in their mind, they'll put them before the judge to see if they're competent or incompetent. But the person who really needs to be there don't get that chance to get there and get the help that they need. And they can't cry out for themselves because one thing about being schizophrenic is that is themselves. So they don't see anything wrong with who they are. They don't see anything wrong with their behavior. And it's hard for them to regulate what consequences are until after something happens and then the responsible identity shows up. That's mental health for you. That's a social gathering of bullies. Because somebody could have helped. Somewhere. I can't help but think about some of the cases that I see around here where just because somebody wants to make a decision that's good and healthy for them, social services gets upset about that and they send them to say that they're mentally ill because they tell them no. If you tell the government no, oh my goodness. If you tell them no and you've got the right bully in office, they can bring everything down for a person who instead needs mental health, may just need medical care. But now we have a person here who needed mental health and they needed mental health care and they didn't get it. They didn't get it. And as for Joel Osteen, this should be a wake-up call for you, Pastor. This should be a wake-up call for you and your congregation to really do the right thing. Don't just sound like a motivational speaker, but get out here and meet people and find out what the needs of the community are. And I can speak about this from where I'm at because that's what I do is I speak. Okay. This is why this is called Talk Jamie Talk, because I speak about things that are concerning to me and others. It's very concerning when the ones that need the mental health care and the mental health advocating, they're not getting it. They're not getting it. But then here we have somebody who's not mentally ill and they get all this care and attention and affection. But the moment somebody says somebody is mentally ill, they got to be looked down upon. What if somebody that was in social service would have really stepped up and said, hey, I think this one time we need to really look deeper into this, get this kid up out of this situation. But they didn't do that. Instead, to make their job easier, because I've heard caseworkers say before, I don't want to write up this report. I don't want to write this report. I'm tired of this case. I mean, we've been dealing with this case for such a long time. I'm tired of it. Let's just hurry up and do something to move this case along. And I mean huffing and puffing. It's your job. Why are you tired? If you're tired, quit. Let somebody else come in there. If you're tired, because one thing that social workers need to know, that a case can go on for years. And if you're not up to it mentally yourself, you don't need to be in that office or in that position where you got to make decisions if a child needs to stay here or not. Because you don't have the mental capacity to do that yourself. You may yourself be going through an identity crisis. That's what I've seen. I've seen the same ones who are there to supposedly help others. I can see them themselves are going through crisis, mental crisis. Again, we gotta stop with this using the term schizophrenia lightly. That's nothing to pick about. That's nothing to joke about. Because people who have that, sometimes when they're not regulated, this is the consequences that we look at, that we share in sorrow. These type of consequences. Now, whether she was a transgender or not, that part doesn't even bother me any. I mean, we just pray for people, because who are we to judge? I mean, seriously. Most of the people who cause so much problems in other people's life is because there be something they be wanting to do and they just don't have the guts to do it. And I'm not saying it's right, but I'm not saying I have a right to judge and tie that person down just because that's, the lifestyle they chose to live. Because I could be out here doing something wrong. And from what I know, no one sin is greater than the other. A sin is a sin. I just hate that this had to happen for this child. And I would say something we need to start looking for, and something we can start doing ourselves as a community, is start paying attention to each other's social media posts. Because now it's trending. It's a trending thing that before a person does a thing, they post about it. It's posts that lead up to it. The same way it's actions sometimes that lead up to it. Say, for example, let's say Genesis went by the grocery store. No, not use her. But what's the girl that said that the child was on side the highway? There was a whole trail of things that girl did in that day that led to her so-called kidnapping, which would turn out to be a lie. But even with her, there's something going on with her too, mentally, because no sane person just ups and says, well, in order to keep this man or woman, that this is what I got to do. Because you don't have to do that. If a person want to be kept, they're going to do what they have to do to stay kept. But anyways, pay attention to social media posts and how people post. If somebody is telling you something, even if it sounds far-fetched, even if it sounds like it's no way in the world that can be real, believe them anyhow. Because in their mind, it's probably real. And because you don't know how their mind works and functions, don't just jump up and be like, don't just be so quick to belittle what they're saying. Because what they're going through may be very real in their head, whether you have proof or not. One thing about someone being schizophrenic, the scenarios that play in their head, it feels really real. And if you tell them that it's not real, you could do more harm than just to be like, okay, I understand you feeling that way. You ain't got to agree with them and edge it on, because that's the worst thing you can do is lie. But you don't have to let them down so hard. You can question them into finding out, is this part of your reality, or is this, part of the schizophrenia talking? And in order to do that, you have to keep speaking the truth to them. If they say this color is purple, then you say, well, I'm glad you see purple, but I see blue, and just try to get them back into reality as much as you can. without belittling them. Without like, for instance, some people may post on social media, I see aliens, I see alien craft. Well, if they see alien craft, that's not your responsibility to go up under their post and say, you just stupid. You're just stupid. There's no such thing as alien craft. Why don't you ask them, well, what else do you see on side of the craft? What's it like inside the craft? See, there's ways to talk to people without belittling them and making them feel like what they feel and what they see is invalid. Because what they are seeing really is valid to them. And they're really seeing it in their mind because their brain is lighting up in different areas. And as it lightens up in different areas, this is how the schizophrenia works. This is how the DID works. The associative identity disorder. They dissociate in order to fight the crisis. When their symptoms become active in schizophrenia, something is going on that's distressing the brain. And once the brain starts to distress, that other identity comes up in that person who is schizophrenic and takes over. Now, who you're going to get, I don't know. You don't know, because it can break off into many areas of life that's broken in them. Whichever area feels the strongest is usually the one that speaks the most. I do know that. So just be mindful of others and others' mental health conditions out here, because we're all fighting battles and you just never know who's going through what. Because I do know for a fact when those identities start surfacing, it's like being around somebody you've never met before. And all you can do is just really sit there and talk to them like they a person. You ain't got to go along with the program or none of that. You just continue to treat them like they are a person. And if you feel like you're in danger, then get out of Dodge. Because some of these identities are very dangerous. Some of these identities will take you out of here. You hear me? And that's what happened with Genesis. This identity took over. This identity with Genesis took over, and it decided that it was going to go and do whatever it was doing at Lakewood. Spirit, whatever you want to call it. But when we're talking in the mental health world, that is a multiple personality. And they can come in all shapes and sizes and colors and voices. Because when they start breaking off like that, the voice can change and they can begin to speak like other people or like somebody you never even know. You'll be like, where you get that voice from? Because they switch in and out that quick. And they switch according to what's going on in the environment and how hyperfixated they are on a certain situation. That's why y'all please stop using this term schizophrenia on people who don't have schizophrenia. Because what you're doing is making it harder for the people who really do have this illness to get the help they need. And for people to recognize what true schizophrenics look like. And they're still people. At the end of the day, that 7-year-old was still a child. Genesis was still a human being. Now, having said that, I'm going to get ready and get off of here. But please keep in mind that what you say to a person can make or break them. Because you never know what they're already going through and how long they've been going through it in their mind. It might not be on the outside yet, but it may just be on the inside, a mind battle that once it comes on the outside, it can be deadly for somebody. So be mindful of your words and actions. And if you do know schizophrenia, people who are schizophrenic, don't laugh at them. Don't pick at them. Talk to them like they are somebody. Because I've seen that the best medication sometimes is just talking. Just talk to somebody like they are somebody and like they mean something to you. And you'll see a difference in their behavior. All right, y'all. So peace, love, and happiness. Thank you for listening to Talk Jamie Talk. Don't forget to share this podcast out with your friends, family, your neighbors, your enemies, your lovers, everybody. Share this podcast out because here is where I talk about sensitive and hard, tough conversations that people don't want to have. But I do. Peace.